Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Longhorns, your daily number one source for all things Texas athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jonathan Davis, the voice of University of Texas football and basketball. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Longhorns your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Longhorns on YouTube for exclusive content and to put a face behind the voice of your favorite podcast. Make sure you like us, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. Anything less than that, I have to believe you're not listening hard enough. It's Hump Day, Longhorn Nation, and I have a great show for you today. Football is around the corner. Sark has announced the spring practice dates. I'll tell you about those, plus the 5 players I'm most excited to watch in spring practices and the orange and white game on April 23rd. The Texas Longhorns football program has brought in a new defensive analyst, Joey Thomas. I'll tell you a little bit about his background and what he brings to this football team in 2022. And the second to the last game in the Irwin Center tonight, TCU versus Texas. I'll preview that matchup. But without further ado, y'all know how we do it on this podcast, Longhorn Nation. Let's get into it. So, disappointing season last year, 5-7, lost to Kansas. We smoked the 21-point lead to Oklahoma. We smoked the lead to Oklahoma State. And things weren't good going into the offseason. But, the best fan base in the nation, Longhorns, hook them. We find a way to get excited. And it's not hard to do when you have a top 10 transfer class out of the transfer portal, when you have the number 5 recruiting class in the nation, headlined by Devin Campbell and Kelvin Banks. You have Sark coming back for his second year. We've seen some of the additions like Gary Patterson to the coaching staff. And then just players left over like Bijan Robinson on offense, Xavier Worthy, and then Agent Zero on defense, who were there last year, but will come in and be even better this year. Some of the best players in the country. So it's not hard to get excited about going into the season. Andre 3000 said spaceships don't come equipped with rear view mirrors, they dip. And we got to officially just burn any memories of last season at this point and move forward. And so Sark has announced the spring training dates starting on March 22nd of this year. It's going to be Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, all the way up until April 23rd, the orange and white game, where we see the players in action for real. And that's going to be part of the Made in Austin weekend, the first annual Made in Austin weekend. We're going to have a lot of great stuff for the Longhorn fans, live music, food and drinks, art, performances, all kind of different stuff. Not to mention the number one baseball team in the country, your Texas Longhorns, will be playing the Baylor Bears at home. So it's a great weekend for the Longhorn fans all around, but especially for the people, all of us that are invested in this Texas football team. And so I can't wait to see him on April 23rd in the orange and white game. And speaking of that game, I want to talk about 5 players that I'm most excited to watch in the spring practices, but of course, in that game. And so number 5 coming in for me is going to start on the defensive side at defensive tackle, Alfred Collins. This is a player coming out of high school that was the number 1 defensive lineman in his district 2 years in a row, junior year and senior year. Depending on where you were looking on what website, he was a top, 50 to 60 prospect in the country coming out of high school. And I don't know if we've seen the level of production that would match those type of expectations thus far in his 2 years at the 40 acres at the University of Texas. Now, I think that he will have a huge year. I think he's going to have to have a huge year and kind of match, the expectations that we've had for him. When you look at a defense that averaged 31 points a game last season, it all starts up front in the trenches, especially a team that only had 20 sacks. And a huge part of his game is going to have to be, of course, getting pressure on the quarterback, getting to the quarterback. But outside of that, you're also going to have to make sure that you're kind of occupying blocks, stopping the run, but occupying blocks, maybe 1 to 2 blockers, definitely taking on double teams, allowing players behind him like Agent Zero, Luke Rockermeyer, and Jalen Ford, the linebackers, to be able to run freely, run in space, and make plays. And so that's going to be a huge part of this Texas defense, taking a step forward, improving from being one of the worst defenses in the Big 12, one of the worst defenses in the country, Alfred Collins is going to have to take that next step on the defensive line. And I think if he does, that makes everybody's job easier. I talked about on the podcast yesterday how the defensive line works in conjunction with the defensive backfield, getting pressure so they don't have to cover as long. And then, of course, once again, if he can occupy blocks, that only allows space for our playmakers at the linebacker position to be able to fly in and not worry about having to shed blocks, but just come in and make plays. So Alfred Collins checks in at number 5 on my list. Number 4, I'm going to the offensive side, and I'm talking about the Texas Longhorns running back, not named Bijan Robinson. Yes, I'm going with Roschon Johnson. Now, we have 2 great running backs behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson and Keelan Robinson. And, of course, Bijan is going to get the majority of the snaps. Of course, Bijan is going to get the majority of the touches. Well deserved. One of the best players in the country, coming in at number 4 on the Heisman rankings. He has the 4th best odds to win the Heisman this year as the best player in college football. When we look at Roschon, a player that's super explosive, super fast, and when he got his opportunities last year, he had 112 yards against Rice on 3 carries, including a 72-yard touchdown run. We saw him with 77 yards against West Virginia, and then he had 179 yards in a game where Bijan Robinson didn't play against Kansas State. So when you got players on the outside like Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, and Isaiah Nair, Jaleel Billingsley at tight end, and then Bijan, Sark can, only utilize Roschon. Utilizing Roschon will make it a nightmare for defenses, right? You already got to worry about all these other players, and you got this change of pace back coming in that allows you to spell Bijan Robinson and not put too much of a workload on him. But also just, I think, a player that if he was on any other team, most teams in the country, he'd be a starter. When you have that level of talent as a backup, you have to find a way to utilize him in a lot of different ways and make sure he's getting snaps and touches. And we know Sark, who's an offensive mastermind, will do that. And it's going to be a nightmare for anybody that is not wearing orange and white, burnt orange and white next season. So Roschon comes in at number 4 on my list. I'll be excited to see how they utilize him in that orange and white game, and then just moving forward into the season, how big of a role he plays on this offense. Because I think if that's something, if he's a player that defenses seriously have to game plan for, is good night Irene for anybody not in the Texas football jersey next season. Moving up to number 3, I'm going back to the defensive side. Once again, we gave up 31 points a game last year, so I'm going to be looking at that defense. I know what the offense can do. I know the type of talent we have, but I'm going to be looking at that defense. I'm coming in at Jaylan Ford. I talked about him a little bit earlier. So he mostly came in spot opportunities last year with DeMarvion Overshine and Luke Brockermeyer holding down the linebacker spots. And Luke Brockermeyer was good last year. Not great. Just didn't see the type of playmaking that you would like to from a starting linebacker. And we know with the Texas football program, it's just a higher standard. We need elite. And Jaylan Ford in his time last year, he looked really explosive, getting to the ball carrier, stopping the run, even showed some competency, guarded tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. And so I'm looking for him to probably take over that starting middle linebacker spot this year. The key for him will be, how do you handle going from coming in and limited snaps, being fresh, to being that starting linebacker, being one of the signal callers on the defense, and being a leader on that defense? Will you still be able to match that level of production that you had in limited time if you're on the field for the majority of the snaps? So that's going to be the biggest key. But I think if Alfred Collins can come in and be better, that defensive line is better. We know that DeMarvion Overshine, Agent Zero, is going to take that next step as he gets more comfortable in transitioning into the linebacker position. We know how talented he is. The defensive backfield, they made a lot of investments at safety and corner. So if Jaylan Ford can come in and continue to be an impact player full-time for the Texas Longhorns, this is going to be a defense that's going to be well improved. I don't know where they'll rank, but they won't be at 100 if Jaylan Ford takes over that starting middle linebacker spot and is really an asset to this Texas Longhorns football team, as he has been in the past. Like I said, the key is just being able to do that on a more consistent basis when you get more playing time. And so Jaylan Ford comes in at number 3 on my list because I think he's going to be huge. Number 2, I'm sticking with the defensive side, but I'm moving back up to the defensive line. One of the commits. So we talked so much about Kelvin Banks and Devin Campbell, rightfully so, the 2 5-stars from the Texas Longhorns class on the offensive line. But on the defensive line, I really like Justice Finkley. He's an early enrollee, came out of Alabama, went to high school in Alabama, and he wrestled in high school. So he's really good with his hands. He's really good with his technique. He can play on the edge. He can slide down and play a little defensive tackle. He's going to give those defensive coaches a lot of versatility. And from everything I've seen, he's already come in. He's a workout warrior. I've seen plenty of workout videos of him out there just going crazy in the weight room. He's ingratiated himself with the fans. He's really becoming a household name. But he just looks hungry, and he has that mindset. And I think that he'll come in right away and be a situational pass rusher, maybe third downs, second and longs, things like that, obvious passing situations. And then eventually towards the end of the year, and especially next year, he'll be an every down starter, a great run stopper, and has some savvy getting to the quarterback for sure. Especially like I said, he was a wrestler, so he has that technique. He's going to be one of the best players on this defense for years to come. Longhorn Nation, if you haven't heard his name yet or don't know much about him, make sure you read into Justice Finkley. He's definitely going to be an asset and a great player to watch for the next few years at the 40 acres. Checking in at number 1 on the list. He should be number 1 on everybody's list. Quinn Ewers, no surprise here. Potential starting quarterback for the Texas Longhorns this season. He has the moxie. He has a mullet in 2022. Let's tell you how much confidence he has. The arm talent, he can make every throw. He has advanced accuracy, great size at 6'3". And I think you're looking at a quarterback. Vegas has him as the number 5 odds to win the Heisman this year. And he hasn't even been announced the starting quarterback yet. So that tells you just kind of the potential he has. I think you're looking at a player that in 2 to 3 years we could be talking about as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL draft. And so the Texas Longhorns are lucky to have him. He does have to beat out Hudson Card for that starting quarterback spot. But if Quinn Ewers gets QB1, if he gets that title, if he is the player under center in the 2022 season, starting with Louisiana Monroe, I'm predicting great things for this Texas football team going into 2022. Hungry? Try Built Bar, especially the Puffs. If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, Longhorn Nation. So we've seen Sark has come in and he's made a lot of changes to the coaching staff. It's really kind of assembled the Avengers, if you think about it, on this coaching staff. So he brought in a new running backs coach in Tashard Choice, a new wide receivers coach in Brennan Marion. We know that he brought in Gary Patterson to help Pete Koskowski on the defensive side. I think the defense is going to be much improved, giving up 31 points a game last season. That won't happen again. Gary Patterson's defenses were really good at TCU. They fell off a little bit in the last couple of years, but he's a really good defensive coach. And so now you bring in Joey Thomas, who is going to help Pete Koskowski coach the defensive backs. And this is a player, he played under Pete at Montana State. He played corner in the defensive backfield. He was a 3rd-round selection by the Green Bay Packers in the 2004 NFL Draft. He also spent time with the New Orleans Saints, Dallas Cowboys, Miami Dolphins, and Oakland Raiders as a player, as well as the Edmonton Eskimos in the CFL. And so he spent time in high school as a coach, and then he coached 2 different high schools, and then he moved on to the college level in 2019 at Fort Scott Junior College before ultimately moving up to Florida Atlantic in 2020 as an analyst. And then after a year as an analyst, he was promoted to the wide receivers coach. And so now he is joining Pete Kwiatkowski again, this time as a fellow coach, not a player under him, once again coming in to help coach the defensive backs. And so I think this is a great move for the Texas Longhorns football team. You're bringing in a player that's bringing in a coach that's already familiar with Pete Kwiatkowski and what he likes to do, having played under him. And he has a great pedigree being a third-round pick in the NFL draft. That's not easy to do, and he played 7 seasons. And so the average career for an NFL player is 3 years. So that tells you that he was very good at what he did in the NFL. And what I like, too, is he's coached on both sides of the ball. So he's been a passing game coordinator in college. He's been really all three. He's been a special teams coordinator and now a secondary coach. And we've talked about some of the players that they brought in. Of course, you have players coming back like Deshaun Jameson on the defensive side in the defensive backfield. But then you bring in Terrence Brooks, who was the third highest ranked prospect in the Texas Longhorns recruiting class. You got Ryan Watts coming over, who played in a lot of games last year for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think he comes in and plays right away. I like Brian Allen Jr. at Brian Allen Jr. at safety out of Aledo. And so he's coming in with a lot of talent to work with. And once again, this defense wasn't great last year. And I think that all three, units on this defense, the linebacker spot, the defensive backfield, and the defensive line are going to have to improve. But I think, once again, with Pete Kwiatkowski and Gary Patterson working in conjunction, I think they're going to have a lot more kind of versatility this season, just bringing in different players. They're going to have a lot of different schemes and a lot of different things a lot of different ways to attack offenses with this defense. And then so you bring in a seasoned NFL cornerback, a coach that's coached in multiple different phases of the game. And he comes in and he could coach up those defensive backs on techniques and best practices and things. And it just only points to, this defense being a lot better than it was last year. We know that the offense is going to take a step forward. We know that. And so the defense, if they can just, match what the offense is doing, they're not going to be as good as the offense. And I'm not saying they're going to go from 100th in the country to what Georgia had last year. Of course, anything like that. But, he's done a really good job, Sark has, bringing in these coaches. And I think that, it starts in the film room. It starts at practice, and it all translates on the field. So if they're getting elite coaching, and which I think Sark has done a good job of bringing in, we're only going to see that production on the field. So like I said, they're bringing in some really good players. Ryan Watts, I think with his experience and his pedigree at Ohio State, he comes right in and probably starts right away opposite of Deshaun Jameson. You got players like Terrence Brooks, who can come in and spell your starters if he doesn't start right away. I mean, he's really talented, the 82nd ranked prospect in the country out of Little Elm, Texas. Or if not, he could play in the slot, play in nickel packages. And if this defensive backfield can hold their own, that only allows you to do so much more with your front seven. So if you have confidence that your defensive backfield can go out there and cover, then you can get a little more aggressive, blitzing, kind of putting them on the island and doing different things. And I think we'll see a big improvement from them, the safeties and the cornerbacks, in man coverage and zone coverage next year. So I really like this move. We talked about, what Sark has done with the coaching staff. He's still looking to bring in David Cutcliffe as an analyst as well to help with the passing game, help with the offense. But Sark has done a great job building up this coaching staff. Joey Thomas, new defensive analyst, and he will be coaching up the defensive backs for the Texas Longhorns football program. So look for this defense to be much improved next year on the Longhorns' path to winning the Big 12 in 2022. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, BetOnline just dropped their College World Series odds, so go check those out. You already know who's at the top. The Texas Longhorns baseball team, the number one team in the country. We love to see it. All right, so tonight, the second to the last game in the Irwin Center, TCU comes in to face the Texas Longhorns, who haven't looked great as of late. They lost against Baylor. They had to go to overtime against an Oklahoma team that got massacred last night by Texas Tech. And then, of course, the loss to Texas Tech by us. Now, Texas, the last time we played TCU, they beat them 73-50, which was on January 25th. Texas has beat TCU 6 straight times, but don't get it twisted, Longhorn Nation. This game will be a lot tougher than 73-50. And Chris Beard even said that in his media availability. He thought, this is Texas. When we played them, we shot over 40% from three, just had everything working. And conversely, the Horned Frogs couldn't get anything going. But he knows that this will be a way tougher matchup. This will not be a 23-point win tonight. However, I will be in the building for the game. So if it is a 23-point win, I'll be in there yelling hook 'em. I might go live. I might do Locked On Longhorns live from the Irwin Center if they get down on the Horned Frogs like that. But I think the biggest key for this game is going to be the rebounding. TCU is an elite rebounding team, especially on the offensive end. Now, they don't shoot the ball well. This is a team that shoots under 30% from three as a team. And so maybe that's why they're so good at offensive rebounding. They have more opportunities. But Texas is a team that hasn't been great at rebounding, and that's kind of been exacerbated by the loss of Trey Mitchell. We just don't have a lot of size. And so we saw in our last game against Texas Tech, we were out-rebounded 40-30, and they can't allow that to happen with TCU. TCU also is a really good team, especially with players like Mike Miles, at getting into the paint. Emmanuel Miller and Mike Miles, they really get into the paint and put pressure on your defense, kind of force you to collapse and then just make plays off of that and get to the free throw line. And so that's going to be key. In the last game, they missed a lot of free throws against Texas, and they're not going to be able to do that, if they're trying to beat the Longhorns. And so Texas is really going to have to keep them out of the paint and force them to be a three-point shooting team. Now, that is easier said than done. Once again, they just have a little bit more size than Texas. That's where Texas lacks, and they're a better rebounding team. But if you can keep them out the paint and force them to be a jump shooting team, I really don't think that they stand a chance. Now, we know that Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen are going to have to be better once again with the absence of Trey Mitchell. When you're losing 9 points a game and 5 rebounds, it doesn't sound like a lot, if you don't watch college basketball, but that's huge, for a team that only averages about 67 points a game, 9 points, and a team that isn't great on the rebounding. 5 rebounds is a lot as well. They just don't have a lot of size. Really out of Christian Bishop, you just don't have a lot of players you can trust down there to play heavy minutes, at least at this point. And so they're going to have to, Timmy Allen and Marcus Carr are going to have to be better. Andrew Jones is going to have to continue the offensive hot streak that he's been on, but he's going to have to shoot a little bit better from the field than he did against Texas Tech. We're going to need more from Courtney Ramey. And Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen, I know I was hard on them on the podcast, but I thought they did a great job of coming up to the podium, answering questions, taking responsibility. And like Chris Beard said, it's a team effort. But Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen put the loss on their backs. And so I think they'll come out at home tonight and have a great performance. And like I said, the keys are going to be rebounding and forcing TCU to take jump shots. They're not a great jump shotting team at all. They like to get into the paint and be aggressive. Like a lot of what we saw, even though Texas Tech can shoot the three a little bit better, a lot of what we see from Texas Tech, they're going to get into the paint. They're going to be aggressive. They're just kind of play with that, dog mentality, which every team in the Big 12 does, really. And that's why there's no easy games. But if they could keep them out the paint, collapse their defense, force them to take jump shots, I think Texas will win this game. Once again, it will not be a 23-point win. It's going to be a lot closer than that. And TCU, who is likely going to be in the NCAA tournament, has been playing great basketball as of late. But Texas should win this game. They will win this game if they can make them turn them into a jump shooting team. Once again, TCU only shooting 29% from the three-point line. So that's where they're going to have to win. And then, of course, on the offensive end, they're just going to have to be more aggressive. We've seen when the offense has really struggled, they have not been able to get into the paint, and they've kind of let defenses dictate what they do. Marcus Carr, Courtney Ramey, and Andrew Jones at the guard positions are going to have to be aggressive and dictate what the defense does and not the other way around. But I think that will happen. Longhorn Nation, they're going to get the win once again. I'm in the building tonight. Really excited to watch the game and really excited to see one of the final two men's basketball games at the Irwin Center. Thank you for tuning in to a Hump Day edition of Locked On Longhorns, your daily number one source for all things Texas athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Until tomorrow, peace.